I unraveled 3 terrifying true countryside horror stories, and what I found will haunt you. I never should have opened that door. The chill crept through me like ice water, freezing my spine. My heart raced. Just an old, creaky barn on my family's rundown land. Or so I thought. I went about my day, tending to the few animals we had left, the smell of damp hay and earth clinging to my clothes. Sunlight barely pierced the overcast sky. The day was supposed to be normal, just another unremarkable afternoon in the countryside. But that door, it called out to me. Whispered promises of forgotten treasures buried within those walls. A soft push, and it leaned open, revealing darkness thick enough to slice. The air hung heavy with the scent of decay and something sweeter, something rotten, yet inviting. A shadow shifted inside, chilling me further. The floor groaned under my feet as I stepped closer. There were whimpers, as if the walls were alive, breathing. I scanned the room, but only shadows danced in the corners. A rustle behind the old feed sacks made me freeze. Just the wind, I told myself. But something tugged at my gut. The tension hung thick. Every crack echoed, as if the barn itself held its breath, waiting for me to make my next move. I turned, my breath trembling in the cold air. Then I heard Ida's soft thud, followed by an unnatural silence. I jerked my head back to the shadows. Something wasn't right. My pulse thundered in my ears. Heart in my throat. I stepped back, and the barn door slammed shut behind me. Darkness enveloped me. I was blind, my hands clawing at the air. I wasn't alone. A figure loomed in the black, tall and twisted. My pulse raced, panic clawing at my mind. A whisper reached my ears, cold and raspy, sending shivers racing down my spine. That's when I realized I wasn't just peering into a dark barn. I had stepped into something far worse, something waiting, watching, ready. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Terror enveloped me, pressing in from every angle. The cold stench of decay swirled thick in the air, suffocating my senses and drowning out any rational thought. I stumbled backward, but the wall jarred my spine, sending a pulse of pain through me. The looming figure shifted closer, its features obscured in the rich dark, yet I could feel its gauzy unsettling awareness that penetrated deep within me. Stay, the voice hissed, laced with malice, each syllable drumming against my ears like a distant warning bell. Fear twisted my insides, and I struggled to take a breath, my lungs fighting against a noxious wave that wrapped around me. Desperate, I turned to push against the door I had once opened, but it felt no longer like a simple barrier. The wood was cold, almost alive beneath my fingers, and it wouldn't budge. Panic surged as I realized the door wasn't just closed, it was actively holding me prisoner. From the darkness, shadows slithered forward, revealing the distorted outlines of things I dared not identify. They brushed against my legs, dragging their elusive silhouettes over the grime-slicked barn floor. I could barely breathe, every instinct urging me to run, but the dark presence wrapped itself around me, immobilizing me in my own fear. Then I heard a cacophony of whispers that layered thick over the air. They spoke my name, echoing like a chant. Each syllable clawed at my sanity, shredding the fragmented remnants of my courage. Help us. The plea reverberated in my mind, its pitiful resonance tugging at the strings of my heart. But how could I help them? What were they? As my eyes adjusted to the nearly impenetrable gloom, I spotted them, faces, twisted and agonized, materializing in the murk. They pressed themselves against the unseen barrier that defined me from them, ghosts of anguish trapped within these walls, mouths open in silent screams, eyes glistening with unshed tears of despair. I was surrounded by their suffering, the air thrumming with their dread. A sharp crack echoed, splitting the air as something splintered in the distance. The barn shook, dust cascading from the rafters like 1,000 falling stars in reverse. It reverberated too close to my heart, that sound a dreadful reminder that whatever wretched fate imprisoned these lost souls could easily turn its sights on me. Suddenly, something cold brushed against my cheek. I flinched, heart racing, and swung around to find nothing but shadows swirling in the dark. "Help us," they whispered again, their voices merging in a haunting chorus. Something inside me shrank with absolute terror. I was their next victim, another soul for the twisted collection guarded by the unnatural force within these walls. Each breath I took felt heavier, laden with invisible chains that sought to drag me into oblivion. That I turned to the only escape, the broken window high up on the wall. Perhaps I could climb, but the jagged shards of glass looked like a gaping maw, ready to swallow me whole. With nowhere left to turn, I placed my hands against the wall, knowing that I couldn't stay here either. I'd become one of them, another whisper to echo through the corridors of this cursed barn, or I would find a way to fight back. But as I took a step toward the window, I felt a tugging pain at my ankle. The shadows had coalesced into something more corporeal, gripping me with skeletal fingers that chilled me to the bone. "Join us," they howled, a symphony of rage and melancholy rising to a fever pitch. My heart thundered wildly, pounding against my chest as I looked at the growing swarm around me. White-hot fear coursed through my veins. I had to escape, or I would be lost forever in the depths of their torment. I scrambled, thrashing against the floor, my feet searching for leverage, but the grip only tightened. Then, above the sound of their wailing, a new noise emerged. Thundering footsteps approached from the darkened threshold of the barn, heavy and deliberate. I froze, heart skipping as I realized something was coming for me. My breath caught, I turned, desperate to see what emerged from within the suffocating shadows. And as the moon broke free from behind a thick layer of clouds, the light spilled through the singular window, illuminating the figure that stepped forward. A monstrous figure, twisted beyond recognition, eyes aglow with a savage hunger, crept into view. With an otherworldly shriek, it lunged towards me. I stumbled back, screaming, choking on my last breaths of hope, caught between the screams of the damned and the hungry maw that threatened to consume me whole. The shriek echoed in my ears, reverberating through my very bones as I stumbled, my back colliding with the cold, unyielding wall behind me. Terror coursed through me like wildfire, scorching my senses and blurring my vision. The grotesque figure, an abomination with sinewy limbs and a contorted maw that opened wide enough to swallow my spirit, shifted closer, moving with a predatory grace that defied reality. The whispers intensified, a manic cacophony spiraling into madness. Let us in, they begged, their voices weaving together like a seething mass, the air heavy with their despair. It was as if the very walls were alive with their sorrow, pulsating with the stories of their torment, begging for release. To think that I could have once called this place a simple barn, a haven for horses and hay, now corrupted into a grave stitched together by anguish and lost years. That I pressed my back further into the wall, searching for any possible way out, but all the energy seemed to drain from my limbs. The figure loomed closer, its eyes uncanny glowing pits piercing my soul, and I knew I had crossed a threshold, entering a land ruled by the damned. Then, tearing through the fog of my horror, a growl rose from its throat, deep and resonant like the rumble of distant thunder. Suddenly, a series of flashes illuminated the barn, brief moments of clarity against the encompassing darkness. I saw them, faces captured in agony, mere inches from my own, mouths contorted in screams that had never escaped. They reached out, their ethereal fingers brushing against my own, seeking salvation as my own body moved in instinctive rebellion against the suffocating grip of the monstrosity inching toward me. Heart pounding, I ripped away from the wall and turned to face the jagged window, its inviting light a beacon of hope. The shadows writhed beneath the floor, their whispers intensifying into a slavering roar as they sensed my defiance. I had no choice, I had to escape, to find a way out before the rift between worlds sealed me alongside them forever. With fear lending me unnatural strength, I dashed toward the window, the jagged shards reflecting glimmers of moonlight like teeth. The fingers of the wretched souls clawed at my ankles, attempting to drag me back, but I fought them off, summoning all my will. "I won't be yours," I screamed, reaching desperately for the remnants of glass. Tears streamed down my face, a mixture of terror and the remnants of hope that flickered like the distant spark of a dying flame. At last, I grasped a shard, its edge sharp and biting against my hand, but there was no time to consider the pain. I lunged forward, using the momentum to propel myself toward the jagged maw of light, but just as I reached the edge of that sanctuary, the monstrous figure lunged. It wasn't simply a horrifying embodiment of tortured souls, it was cunning, aware of my desperation. In one violent motion, it swiped at me, a grotesque hand mirroring the despair of those trapped in its web. I felt its icy fingers rake across my shoulder, dragging me back, toward the heart of darkness. In that moment, I glanced back, catching a final view of those tormented faces. Their eyes were wide with a longing that pierced through the fabric of my sanity, their screams echoing against the chaos. "Save us!" They begged again, but the paralyzing grip of the figure overwhelmed my senses. Its mere existence threatened to swallow the screams of the lost entirely. As I discovered a moment of strength within the depths of my fear, I swung the shard towards the being, slicing through the empty air. My stubbornness fueled a desperate cry, an invocation for their release. "I won't be yours today," I shouted, thrusting the glass as hard as I could into the mass of darkness, feeling it slip through the void of its being, and in an instant, everything shattered. The screams, the whispers, every heart-wrenching visage dissolved into nothingness, drawn back into the hellish abyss, leaving me wholly alive yet suffocated by silence. But not for long, the barn began to tremble, the very structure quaking as if reacting to the rejection. The ground shifted beneath me as cracks spread like black veins through the floor, and suddenly, the air turned rancid, a suffocating tide pushing against my lungs. I staggered backward, my heart racing anew, sensing the threat wasn't defeated, it was merely changing. From the crumbling floor, a grotesque figure emerged more monstrous than before, a horrific parody of life rising from shadow and ruin. I heard the echo of its cackle, boomingly triumphant, as the voices of the damned surged once more, howling for vengeance. "Join us forever." The shadows writhed, an expanding mass of horror swallowing my retreat, and as I tried to back away, they enveloped me with a warm, fetid embrace. I screamed, feeling the tendrils of darkness curl around my throat, and in a moment of sublime horror, I realized the truth. I was not merely trapped in their world, I had become a conduit for their anguish, the portal of their suffering, drawing me down into the depths of a new nightmare from which there may be no escape. And then, amidst the chaos, I felt another presence, a cold whisper against my ear that sent shivers thrumming through my core, "Welcome." As darkness closed in, I knew in that instant that I was never alone, and my eyes widened in terror as I turned to face the one who had come to claim me. The air thickened, saturated with the weight of dread as I turned to meet the gaze of the new shadow. The figure stood silently at the edge of the barn, emerging as if forged from the very fabric of night. It was tall, towering, in fact its outline a silhouette against the flickering remnants of moonlight that fought through the darkness. Its face, if it could even be called that, was obscured by a veil of shadow, a shifting curtain that hinted at features I dared not comprehend. "Welcome," it repeated, the word curling around my senses, wrapping me in chilling familiarity. The intonation held an unsettling harmony of malice and warmth, sending echoes of the damned into frenzy. I could feel the wretched souls behind me stirring with renewed urgency, their soft moans blending into a desperate symphony of despair. I trembled, fighting against the suffocating claustrophobia of dread, the shadows wrenching me backward while the new presence seemed to draw closer, savoring my fear. "You've made a mistake, little one," it whispered, each syllable dripping like poison into my veins, sending violent shivers racing down my spine. "You must understand this place obeys me now." Each word felt like a blade slicing through the fabric of reality, pinning me in place. My heart thundered, splintering against the walls of my chest as my mind grappled with the truth of its claim. I struggled for breath, feeling the grip of despair tighten around my throat like a noose woven from the very threads of night. The once vibrant barn felt increasingly like a crypt, the scent of decay overwhelming my senses. Pulses of energy coursed from the floor, a grotesque heartbeat resonating through the ruined beams that struggled to announce the impending collapse of sanity itself. I felt the walls begin to constrict around me, as if the barn was aware, hungry for flesh and whispers, yearning to consume what remained of my soul. With a sudden surge of defiance, I tore my gaze away from that haunting visage, focusing instead on the jagged shards of glass still scattered across the floor. They glinted ominously, a flutter of hope igniting in my chest. A desperate plan formed amid the chaos. If I could carve a path through the madness, perhaps I could outsmart whichever fiend sought to own me now, but as I shifted my weight to lunge forward, the air thickened, suddenly electric with the presence of unseen eyes. I hesitated, unease winding its way through me like ivy, curling around my heart. All at once, the whispers turned savage, angry at my defiance, claws of shadow stretching through the air, grappling for my limbs with deceptive gentleness. Each invisible touch sent a jolt of fear racing down my spine. "Release them," I rasped, my voice startling me with its brittle resolve. "You don't own me. I refuse." The figure before me erupted into a cacophony of laughter that echoed off the barn walls, a horrible blend of glee and menace melding into something grotesque. "You think you can unweave the strands of their misery? They are entwined with yours now, a tapestry of shared wretchedness," it taunted. My eyes darted to those shadowy figures, their faces twisted in eternal anguish, and in that brief connection, I felt the weight of their despair pressing against me. I was becoming one with their torment, the essence of my terror woven into theirs. I staggered back as the truth-crushed meth darkness was no longer just seeking to claim me, it was already embedding itself within the marrow of my being. I heard a low growl behind me, the figure before me swirling into chaos, and suddenly, jarring screams erupted in unison as the souls surged forward, writhing, worrying at me like ravenous wolves. It was as if they could sense my resolve faltering, angry at my lingering humanity that clung stubbornly to hope. In that moment, I jolted, clutching the shard of glass in my palm, its sharpness biting through my skin, a primal signal that life still flickered within me. I could hear the soft buzzing of their despair, a sinister chorus that seemed to echo around every bend of my reality. The walls trembled violently once more, and I realized this time, the barn was collapsing. As beams splintered and shadows stretched, I darted toward the doorway that threatened to loom farther away with every step, pulsing with malignant energy. My pulse pounded in rhythm with the chaos unfolding around me, shadows crawling deeper, binding tighter as the essence of fear enveloped me, and just when I thought the inky tendrils might claim me entirely, the ground lurched. I stumbled, the world pivoting in modern horror, and then I felt it, something cold and probing sank into my shoulder from behind. I twisted, a frantic gasp escaping my lips as I turned to see fingers, shadowy and sinister, emerging from the darkness, grasping hungrily for me. "Join us," the velvety whisper coiled through the chaos, looping around my mind as I screamed, wrenching myself free. But as I stumbled into the blinding light of the barn door, a hand locked around my ankle, dragging me backward into the vortex of despair, the figure grinning wider, revealing teeth that glinted like tarnished metal. And finally, all at once, the air exploded with cries, the dam breaking as darkness flooded in, and I was left teetering on the edge of consciousness. My own scream echoed among the shadows, the last remnant of hope before silence descended like a shroud, and as my vision darkened, I realized, in that all-consuming moment, that the very heartbeat of the barn had synchronized with my own, and it was not alone. My eyes fluttered open, the world spinning into focus like a broken kaleidoscope. The barn door loomed above me, but instead of the outside world, I lay sprawled upon an altar of shadows, slick and oozing, an echo of warmth mixing with a chilling coldness that made my skin crawl. The ground pulsed beneath me, vibrating with an ominous energy that seemed to dredge up the lost fragments of my memories, faces of the lost, their spectral forms forever wandering the edges of my mind, grappling with the remnants of my own screams that echoed like wind through the hollow barn. I pushed myself up, my heart thrumming in my chest like a war drum. The shadows writhed closer, recording my movements like morbid scribes, eager to detail my descent into madness. I could feel their whispers now more clearly, out of sync, a chorus rising and falling, each note steeped in pain, resonating with an unintelligible language that twisted deeper into my consciousness, seeking to unravel the very fabric of my being. The veiled figure stood at the far end of the barn, its towering frame punctuated by the flickering light cast from above. It watched insinuatingly, a puppet master appreciating its own handiwork. "Not so easy to escape, is it?" It sang, the melody laced with a dark sweetness that felt like a trap closing around my heart. You see, once you've danced with despair, you are bound to it. Your fate is now tethered to ours. The air thickened further, pulling and pushing as though the very shadows craved the touch of my soul. I could feel the despair seep into my bones, a creeping infection gnawing at my will. No, I gasped, fighting against the tide, trying to piece together the frayed edges of my resolve. I won't join you, but you already have, it intoned. The ground tremored beneath me, growing restless as if in response to its taunts. Let me show you. The shadows shimmered and twisted, parts of the barn peeling away like the skin from a raw wound, revealing twisted, nightmarish scenes clawing for life. Each dark tableau unraveled before me, a child lost in the woods, her cries a wretched echo, spectral figures, mouldering away in ages past, their mouths stretched in agony, lovers eternally torn asunder, reaching endlessly to bridge the void that held them apart. With each vision, my resolve chipped away, each scream ricocheted off the barn walls, spiraling into my mind, urging me to succumb. Feel it, the figure coaxed, stepping closer, a sinister relish lighting the contours of its obscured face. You cannot resist what you are. I blinked, forcing back the tide of tears that threatened to spill as I fought to expel the noise, the horrors that gnawed hungrily at the edges of my sanity. With each scream, I felt their weight, felt their souls clawing through the darkness, hoping against hope for release. Were they not just like me? Desperate souls grasping for any thread of light. The barn creaked and groaned, the shadows intertwining around me like serpent tails, encasing me in a grip that was cold and unforgiving. Together, we are stronger. You can surrender to the darkness, the figure whispered, almost tenderly. Or you can fight and discover what awaits you in truth. With a surge of fury, I screamed, I refuse your chains. Gripping the shard of glass, I lunged, scattering a circle of dust, a barricade against the dark whispers. The glass glowed as if feeding off my determination, transforming its wicked edge into a beacon. It pierced through the shadows that gathered hungrily, slicing into the blackness, revealing a fleeting glimpse of the world beyond, a glimmer of untainted light. But as the vision flickered, the figure howled in rage, its veils darkening and swirling, pulling the shadows tighter around me. You cannot escape, child. It roared, waving a hand, and in response, the walls around the barn buckled and twisted, the air falling into an echoing vacuum as darkness began to suffocate the light. I felt panic clawing at my throat, the weight of despair thickening like fog. What fury had I unleashed? In that moment, I felt a sudden cold metallic fingers grazing my cheek, drawing my gaze to a corner of the barn that had been shrouded in black fury. There, melding with the walls, stood another figure, a swirling mass of anguish and shadows, its eyes glowing with a dim, predatory hunger. It spoke without words, a guttural rasp that ground against my thoughts. Join us in unity, in despair there lies power. Before I could register the horror flashing through my mind, the barn shuddered once more, the ground giving out beneath me. I could feel the depth of the void opening, a chasm of darkness eager to swallow me whole, where time and sanity intertwined with shadows, and as I plummeted, with my heart racing and my scream lost to the expanding darkness, the haunting laughter wrapped around me like a shroud, distant and satisfied. The colossal figure turned away, an eerie silence spreading through the barn, and the shadows thrummed with a rhythm of waiting, a promise that what was buried would soon resurface. Until then, I would learn that in this struggle of shadows, the darkness grows hungrier, and those who dare to tread the line between hope and despair are the ones most in peril. I woke in darkness, but this time, there was no altar beneath me, only the unforgiving ground, damp and slick with something putrid. My body ached, bruised and battered, but the gnawing horror that tightened around my throat felt even worse. The shadows whispered with cruel jesters' voices, inches from my ears, but they bore no comfort. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing, but the world remained cloaked in an oppressive absence of light. The air hung heavy with the scent of decay, a fetid breath curling like smoke around my face, gripping my senses. I couldn't tell where the barn ended and the abyss began. Every direction was a darkness without distinction, but I forced myself to move, driven by the primeval urge to escape whatever malevolent force lurked just beyond my perception. Yet the shadows moved with me, weaving around my ankles like vines intent on dragging me back into their depths. Just then, a flicker of light in the distance pulled at my attention, a single glowing orb, pulsating like a dying star, beckoning me deeper into the blackened recesses of the barn. My instincts warred with my curiosity, desperation carved a gnawing path through my mind. I had to reach it. As I approached, it became apparent that the light came from something more than I could comprehend, a crude lantern, suspended from the looming rafters by a rusted chain, its flame flickering strangely, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. The shadows didn't merely twist, they contorted, reshaping into half-formed faces, twisted visages of rage, sorrow, and an insatiable hunger. They called to me with siren songs, offering promises of power and darkness, caressing the edges of my consciousness, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. Caught in the gravitational pull of the lantern, I reached upward, desperate to touch its warmth, beacons of relief against the despair. But as my fingers grasped the cold metal, the flame abruptly extinguished, plunging me into a thicker darkness, where the grotesque faces morphed into expressions of torment. Recurring guest, crooned a voice from behind, familiar yet foreign, the texture of dread coating each syllable like spilled ink. I spun around, heart thundering, to behold the towering figure once more, its form indistinguishable from the shadows, blending into the chaos like a spectre returning home. It stepped closer, the malevolence intertwining with the darkness. Did you think you could escape unscathed? You walk this realm now, and here, the shadows seep into your very essence. That I recoiled instinctively, but found myself enveloped in the oppressive weight of its presence. It's too late, it hissed, each word puncturing the air like a knife. You've chosen the path of desire, and with it, grudges that haunt our home will now claim you as their own. The barn trembled, the sound of groaning would reverberating against my bones. I took a step back, and where my foot landed there was nothing. A trapdoor I hadn't seen before cracked open, releasing a wail, 1,000 lost souls crying out in unison. Gnarled hands, formed of dark energy, clawed their way through the widening crevice, dragging with them the very essence of despair. Hungry for flesh, for life, the figure erupted in laughter, a chorus of insanity woven from centuries of grief. Join them, or become one of us, the choice is yours. Every instinct screeched in protest, but as the floor began to shift upward, tilting me toward the chasm, panic surged in icy veins. I stumbled, feeling the cold breath of spirits brushing against my skin, urging me to fall, to let go. But behind me, the figure gnashed its teeth invisibly, promising chaos should I resist. In a moment of raw desperation, I lunged back towards the lantern, grappling for its lifeline of hope. But beautiful flames flickered back to life, not ignited by my touch but by the sinister echoes of laughter resounding all around me like haunting lullabies. The glow was accompanied by anguished cries, and in the flickering light, I saw the faces twisted, tortured, forever trapped. With a feverish scream, I tore my eyes away from the light, stumbling back toward the edge of the chasm. Just as I bent to find my footing, a hand seized me, a cold, bony grip wrapping around my ankle as I tumbled, scratching and clawing for a grip that was not there. The last vision I caught before the howl of the wailing souls engulfed me was the figure's haunting smile, a glimpse of triumph on its shadowy face. Just before the darkness swallowed me, I felt my flesh begin to burn as I understood this was not just an end, it was the beginning of the endless night. The air thickened, every breath laced with desperation, and the shadows hissed in excitement. And as the chasm closed, I realized I was no longer merely a visitor, I was a part of this horror. My scream echoed through the darkness as the cries of the forgotten surged, and in that instant, I knew that resignation to this nightmare was where true power lay. As I struggled against the tendrils of despair, I felt a new fear flare, a glimpse of a familiar figure standing at the edge of the abyss, watching with hungry eyes. It was me, or what was left of my former self, shifting and twisting into something unholy. And just like that, I understood the darkness had found its next plaything. The darkness closed in like a shroud, wrapping its tendrils around me as I fell into the endless void, a cacophony of anguished wails rising to mesh with the silence of despair. My body tumbled through the depths, an unwelcome tenant drifting through a forgotten dreamscape, where the scenery morphed and twisted in grotesque ballot, uncountable forms vying for attention with pits of writhing shadows and glimpses of indistinct horrors. Then, the tumbling ceased, abruptly replaced by the sensation of solid ground beneath my feet, yet my mind struggled to comprehend where I was or how I had arrived. I gasped for breath, trying to shake the remnants of the nightmare from my mind, but the putrid stench clung to me, an omnipresent reminder of the chasm I had slipped through. A low, guttural growl emanated from somewhere deep within the filth, interrupting the silence like an unwanted apology. My heart raced, recognizing instinctively the primal urge to flee. My ears perked at the rustle of movement, a breath too close, yet the darkness obscured any semblance of reassurance. I could feel the oppressive weight of unseen eyes laden with malevolence watching from within the void. Shadows flickered and danced at the edges, coalescing into indistinct figures that pulsed with ominous intent. That I stumbled forward, driven by an instinctual dread that prickled at the nape of my neck. With each ragged step, the ground beneath became more unstable, scattering dirt and debris like the remnants of shattered dreams, as if the earth itself was pushing back against my presence. Panic welled up inside me, barely contained, as the wails of the tormented souls threaded through the tendrils of night, singing songs of torment wrapped in agony. Suddenly, silhouettes burst forth from the shadows, a procession of distorted figures cavorting and writhing. Their faces morphed and twisted into something grotesque, contorted in their eternal anguish, mouths stretched in silent screams that tugged at a deep-seated empathy I barely understood. They no longer bore resemblance to the living, they were lost souls yearning for freedom, forever trapped within the cloak of darkness. One of them broke from the horde, drawing closer, its hand stretched in a futile gesture. I recoiled at the sheer horror reflected in its eyes, blank and hollowed, yet filled with an unyielding, desperate rage. "Help us!" it rasped, voice like the churning of gravel. "You must find the heart before it consumes you too." The air turned icy, the fear clawing at my throat like a ravenous beast. "What heart?" I gasped, but before I could process an answer, shadows surged forward, dragging the pleading figure back into the depths of darkness. Their screams echoed, trailing off into a haunting silence, leaving behind that macabre promise lingering in the air. Find the heart. That I stumbled through the haunting blur of memories, the landscapes shifting erratically from walls pulsating with terrible life to broken bones jutting up like the teeth of some unholy god. I wanted to scream, but the air was sucked from my lungs, leaving nothing but a bitter taste of anguish that turned my stomach. With each moment lost in this otherworldly labyrinth, I felt time unraveling beside me, eroding whatever remnants of sanity I struggled to cling to. Clawing through my thoughts was the instinct, the notion that I was running out of time. I had to find it, I had to find whatever vestige of purpose and illumination lay hidden within this endless night. Panic surged anew as I darted past the horde of tortured souls, haphazardly feeling my way through the chaos of shadows and cries, searching for any semblance of direction. My heart raced faster with every step, as if driven by a malevolent force compelled deeper into the heart of the terror that surrounded me. With every tread, the phantom whispering intensified, leading to a rusted door wedged in the wall of shifting shadows, a door far too familiar. I jerked it open, revealing a room cloaked in eerie twilight and palpable dread. Rust and decay painted the walls, but one thing remained. Untouched at the center hung an ancient crystal, pulsating with a haunting light that throbbed in my chest, mirroring the beat of my body. Yet the very air turned electric. Something stirred behind me, sharp and lingering, a darkness that felt both new and ancient. I turned slowly, dread cementing my feet. The faces of the lost were there, fissures of fury and sorrow marred their features as they clawed at my very essence. And behind them loomed an insatiable wrath, the towering figure once again, its wicked grin palpable beneath the cloak of shadows, inching toward me, crawling across the ground with grotesque grace. "Did you think you could restore what was lost?" it taunted, voice echoing off the walls like bells of doom. "This is only the beginning. The heart knows all, and so shall you when it claims you." The horror turned palpable, thickening the air until I could taste the metallic tang of dread on my tongue. A flash of understanding struck me. Heart was not merely a catalyst for salvation, it was fuel for something far more sinister. It wanted me, body and soul, and the horde of lost souls would be the price. That as I backed away, panic coursing through my veins, the room warped around me, shadows drawing closer, reaching until at last they began to merge into one singular presence, the figure's shadow stretching toward me with an inevitability that felt like death itself. My pulse quickened, but amid the chaos of the shadows, I caught sight of the pulsating heart, its light flickering like a frail candle. With an instinct no longer my own, I lunged forward to take hold of the heart, ready to claim the power it promised. Yet, as my fingers brushed against the cold edge, the shadows surged, intertwining around me, entwining my fate with their unholy desire. In that moment, I felt the true weight of darkness. It was an entity that desired not just a vessel, but companionship, a kindred spirit to plunge into the abyss together. With a final anguished scream, I grasped the heart, but a bone-chilling laughter erupted around me, drowning my senses in its haunting embrace, and then everything shattered. The world jostled, reshaping into confusion, and with it, reality dulled to a silence so absolute it drowned out even the thunder of my pulse. I was suspended in an unending moment, horror swirling through the shadows like whispers of forgotten secrets, and as I blinked into the dark, I realized I wasn't alone. Those hollow eyes, the twisted faces, they were all me, every fragment of despair pulling me further into the abyss. Yet amidst the endless despair, a singular thought resonated through what now awaited me in the depths. The heart pulsed in my grasp, and just beyond it, the figure loomed, its whispers promising a fate far worse than death itself, and then I knew darkness desires company, and I was merely the next story it would tell. The shadows swirled around me, an inescapable whirlpool of despair as I clutched the heart, its pulse intertwining with my own erratic rhythm. I could feel the glee emanating from the figure, a grotesque harbinger of the fate I had foolishly invited forward. "Welcome, dear," it crooned, voice oily and dripping like honey laced with poison. "You have made your choice, and it shall be the choice that binds you." I recoiled as tendrils of shadow threatened to wrap around my arms, pulling the heart closer in a grotesque mockery of intimacy. The ancient glow flickered, casting unsettling shadows that twined around the room like serpents, feasting on my panic. "Release it!" I screamed, fighting against the cold grip of the darkness. Each shrill cry echoed back at me, a chorus of my own desperation, but the heart would not let go. It held me captive, a magnetic pull I could not resist. I felt its icy fingers plunge deeper into my consciousness, pinning me in a claustrophobic revelry of dread. In those swirling shadows, scenes unfolded, visions of torment and inner chaos that painted a canvas of agony I never wanted to witness. Suddenly, the room ruptured as an anguished wail cut through the thick silence, dislodging the fragile thread of dread that held me. The shadows trembled, silhouettes danced madly as if responding to the cry, and from them emerged a figure, a woman, wreathed in shadows but defined by a hollow grief. Her eyes were wells of sorrow, and her mouth framed a silent scream that echoed the longing for release. "Help me!" she gasped. But as I blinked, her features shimmered, shifting like reflections in troubled water. "You must destroy it before it takes your soul," she implored, reaching forward with a desperate hand that threatened to pull me into her torment. In that moment, doubt clouded my thoughts. Was the heart truly an instrument of enlightenment, or was it the key to my own damnation? I clasped it tightly, words of resistance caught in my throat. The dark figure watched, an insufferable glee dancing across its features as if my struggle was a delightful performance punctuated by despair. I drew back, torn between the searing light and the darkness that beckoned me so sweetly. The woman reached out again, imploring me with her tear-streaked visage. "Your soul will cry in the emptiness," she warned. "Let them all go." At the sound of her voice, the shadows behind her writhed with malignancy. They reached for her, eager to pull the innocent back into their grasp, and my heart ached for the loss that could come if I did nothing. The heart pulsed violently, a restless contradiction of light promising salvation but threatening damnation in the same breath. With trembling resolve, I placed my palms against its smooth surface, summoning every ounce of strength to resist its call. "No," I whispered, desperation lining my voice. "I will not be the vessel, not today." A sudden shock coursed through me, as if the heart recoiled at my defiance, and the shadows surged angrily around me, thrumming with turbulence, but the heart did not want to relinquish its grip. It throbbed against my hands, intensifying, filling the air with a raw, chaotic energy that fueled the darkness around me. I could sense its ancient bonds that intertwined countless souls in an eternal dance of horror tightened their hold. The laughter of the figure distorted through the room, the sound a brittle facade of harmony laced with malice. The moment teetered on a twisted edge, where every heartbeat echoed with dread promise. I turned to the woman, tightening my grip. "I can't leave you," I cried, the tears blurring my vision. Still I felt the pull of the heart siphoning away any hope. "Use the heart," she implored, her voice strained beneath the weight of despair, eyes burning with urgency. You can seal the darkness within it. You are the bridge, transcend the agony before it consumes your very essence. With only a heartbeat left for decision, I hurled the heart towards the figure. The pulsating light cut through the shadow like a beacon, freezing everything in its path as if time itself held its breath. The shadows recoiled, shrill screams emanated from their depths, yet the heart stayed in the air a moment longer, wavering in a glow of terrifying brilliance. I felt the essence of the incarnate darkness surge forward, the air thick with the cold of its wrath. Foolish choice. Came the booming voice, echo resonating as the darkness charged for the heart, but as it did, the luminous pulse began to absorb the swirling shadows. The room erupted into chaos, shadows twisting wildly in their last desperate effort to remain whole, and then, a moment of clarity and horror merged. The heart exploded with a storm of light, dazzling yet haunting, silhouettes disintegrating into whispers before it swelled with shadows. I threw my arms over my face as blinding radiance enveloped the room, time fracturing like the shatter of glass, revealing what lay beyond the murky veil, a world of blinding white and creeping darkness. But in the chaotic storm of the ethereal light, a chilling laugh echoed, reverberating against the walls, insinuating itself into my mind. You think to destroy me? I am forever hungry. The figure's voice compounded the dread, the light recoiled, absorbing me into its depths, and I heard the woman's voice piercing through the cacophony, it will never end. It will follow you, and just as suddenly as it had begun, the light snuffed out, leaving me in a hollow void. The darkness settled, unervingly familiar and encompassing, threading itself along the seams of my very soul. I fell, weightless, lost to the whispering shadows that now cradled me with a sinister embrace. That I and the abyss, I could feel it, I had not defeated the darkness, it had merely retreated, waiting for my inevitable return. Out of the silence, came the echo of laughter, chillingly melodic, a haunting promise that the true horror was only beginning. And as I sank deeper into solitude, a voice whispered around me, soft yet sinister. Welcome back. We've been waiting for you. The shadows thrummed with life, and I understood then this was not a prison, but a homecoming, where I would succumb, body and soul. And from the depths of the darkness, the final chilling whisper coiled around me, now, tell us your tale. The darkness clung to me like wet fabric, cold and damp, yet eerily comforting as I drifted deeper into its embrace. My thoughts swirled, disjointed like broken glass reflecting shards of memory, the heart, the figure, the woman pleading in vain, all had become distorted echoes in this suffocating void. My fears wrestled with a twisted sense of belonging, grappling for dominance like shadows ensnaring the light. That as I surrendered to the darkness, faint whispers snaked through the air. They coiled around my limbs, their silken touches reminiscent of gentle fingertips sliding across my skin. Tell us, they urged, insistent and enveloping, a haunting symphony that beckoned me forward into the abyss. Against my will, I began to recount. My talamy voice trembled as I spoke of the heart and the figure of malice, of the woman whose eyes could surely call forth the dead. Each word sank into the darkness, eliciting rumbles of eerie laughter that mingled with the essence of my fears. The shadows pulsated, their rhythm synchronized with my heartbeat, each pulse reminding me of a life previously lived, of a choice now lost. That a wave of unease swept over me as the whispers congealed into a single entity, a grotesque amalgamation of voices layered upon one another, churning with primitive hunger. More, they intoned, the sound ricocheting off unseen walls, resonance saturating the air. Your story is but a thread, weave us the tapestry. Suddenly, within that suffocating cocoon, scenes began to emerge again, as if the darkness had drawn a cruel curtain, projecting my memories like nightmarish slides on the walls of my mind. I saw the little house at the edge of the forest, my childhood sanctuary where I had fled from the world. But no longer was it the haven of dreams, it was alive with torment, shadows slinking along the ground like creeping vines, crawling up the walls. The whispers intensified, and as if they were summoning, dark tendrils spiraled through the air, coiling tightly around my throat. Choking back terror, I fought to suppress the images, but they remained resolute. They were alive, and I was their puppeteer, still tangled in this macabre dance. There was a knocking then, sharp and insistent, a sound I had long buried but had never truly escaped. The shadows flickered, allowing a brief glimpse of the door from my past, splintered and warped, much like the remnants of my youth. I could almost hear the echoes of laughter cascading beyond it, the rhythmic padding of little feet that I had chased on summer days long forgotten, a time when innocence prevailed. Open it. The voices hissed, excitement bubbling beneath their sinister tones. Let us see what lies beyond the darkness. The door swung ajar with a grating creak, revealing the faint glimmer of light beyond. But instead of warmth, it suffocated me, the brightness soaked in eerie stillness, every echo a mournful reminder of what I had lost. The room seemed to pulse, shadows thickening with malicious intent, as if the darkness longed to consume what flickered weakly in the night. And then I saw Hera figure standing in the doorway, a child once familiar, now distorted with sorrow and shadow. Why did you leave me? Her voice bounced around the space, shattered, sharp. I recognized the child. It was me, yet warped into an abyss of despair, swallowed whole by that which I had sought to escape. I shivered, regret winding tightly around my heart. Her eyes glowed with haunting memory, the last vestige of happiness that had once lit my path, but now only darkness lingered, a vessel of sorrow that grew larger, thirsting for resolution. Come home. You belong here. She pleaded, the echo of hopeless longing fueling the shadows that tightened their grip. No. I can't. I screamed, desperation clawing at my throat. Visions of the figure, of the heart pulsing malevolently, clouded my thoughts. I'm trapped here. I don't belong to this horror, but my words fell into an abyss, swallowed by the laughter that became a cacophony of torment. Endless night awaits. The shadows laughed, spiraling tighter. You cannot escape what is your essence. Something shifted then, a reminder of the heart. Its presence vibrated within my soul, a tether to a complex web of despair and hope. I can use it, I whispered, nudging against the treacherous grounding of doubt. I can change the tide. Yet, as those words slipped from my lips, the shadows erupted, a tempest of rage clawing forth to avenge the rising spark of recklessness. The laughter grew dissonant, grotesque, intertwining with howls of protest. You think you can control this? This is not a game. Then the echoes shifted again, morphing into a chilling crescendo that engulfed everything in the void. My vision warped, the doors of memory burst open, flooding me with relentless visions of torment. The anguished faces of those whom I had lost, swept away in a cruel tide of tragedy, and standing in the heart of torment, I felt the cold embrace of inevitability seep into my bones. You've made your choice, and it shall be the choice that binds you. The voices mocked, exhaling a breath of shadow that settled within me like a shroud, tightening with each agonizing realization that I staggered backward, heart racing, feeling the pulse within me synchronize with the tide of darkness enveloping every shred of hope. But just as I turned to resist, just as the tendrils of shadows encircled me, a piercing scream sliced through the cacophony. Amidst the chilling laughter and howling voices, a new sound reverberated, a familiar cry, echoing across time and space. It resonated with the urgency of loss, a sound that shattered the suffocating grip of despair. Mama, help me. And then, in that moment of fear, it struck me it wasn't just my story being told anymore. It sounded like the voice carried across dimensions, a cry of innocence tugging at the very core of my being. The looming shadows pulsed, a grotesque living tapestry woven from layers of sorrow, pulsing with something ancient and insatiable. That I reached out, the pull of familial affection igniting a flickering ember of defiance in my chest. But the echoes of the shadows tightened violently around me, a mix of hunger and rage that howled for my surrender. I will save you. I cried, snatching at the intermingling strands of light and dark, ready to plunge into the depths once more, regardless of the price it would exact. Yet as I dared to leap forward through that suffocating veil, everything erupted into chaos. The darkness surged, swelling with a life of its own, spiraling into an abyss that echoed back at me with a terrible truth. Welcome, dear, coiled the sinister voice, one that knew all too well that while I sought salvation, I remained trapped in the very horror I sought to escape. And as the shadows danced in mad euphoria, I realized this was but the beginning. From the depths surrounding me, the chilling laugh returned to mock my resolve. Now you've opened the door, and we've only just begun. As the shadows swirled around me, their cold fingers slipping into my skin like icy tendrils, I felt reality fracture. The ancient energy hum at my core vibrated dangerously, a pulsing reminder that I had become a nexus between this realm and the one choked with souls yearning for salvation. I struggled, knowing instinctively that the heart I had embraced was no mere vessel of light, it was a vile entity, fanning the flames of despair that sang through the air like a dirge, "Help me." That haunting voice echoed again louder now, a tenebrous chant clinging to forgotten echoes of childhood. My heart sank, twisting painfully at that memory. It was an innocent cry, yet it was suffused with agony that made it beat like a drum of war against my ribs. Every word pulled at the darkness I had unwittingly tailored into my very spirit, stitching me into the fabric of this nightmare, but the more I fought, the more the shadows seemed to amplify, snarling with invisible mouths, pressing hard against my mind. "Tell us. What do you seek?" They hissed, the cacophony of their voices merging into a terrifying choir. Memories danced behind my eyelids, shadows of my past life, of my family, of what once was before these horrors wove their way into my existence that I wished to be free. I screamed, clenching the heart in my trembling hands. "I refuse to become part of your curse." And yet, the figure emerged once again, its form a blend of shadow and malice, features indistinct but the presence overwhelmingly familiar. "Ah, little one," it crooned with delight, "you truly believe you can sever the ties that bind you? The darkness you fear is the very thing that gives you strength. You are mine." The words crashed against me, wrapping like vines around my spirit, coaxing the residual echoes of my childhood to swirl in celebration. Faces of the lost drifted past in a sorrowful parade, agonized, pleading, and yet so familiar, like long-forgotten specters of another life. Grief washed over me. But even in despair, a flickering ember within me ignited, clawing back against the darkness. Enough. I resisted, desperate to shake off the shadows that threatened to devour any spark of rebellion I had left. How could I fight a creature that had become part of my flesh and blood? The heart pulse said no longer just an object but a manifestation of the darkness entwined within me. I hesitated, fear grappling within, but the child's cries echoed more deeply than the shadow's taunts. With newfound determination, I clutched the heart tightly in my hands, channeling everything hate, sorrow, regret, love into that object ensnared within me. This was my story, and I refused to succumb. With a primal roar, I hurled the heart into the depths of the shadows. As it sailed through the darkness, light burst forth, radiating blindingly, illuminating the twisted forms, the dark faces of the lost souls yearning for release. The heart ignited the very essence of despair, cracking the foundation of their binding, compelling their ethereal forms to surge forth in a flood of light. No. The figure shrieked, its visage contorting with rage. You cannot extinguish what is eternal, but the heart absorbed the screams and wails, pulling them into its embrace, weaving light into the fabric of the darkness. Suddenly, everything convulsed, the shadows undulating beneath their own horrific weight, pushing back against the unfurling luminescence. I felt it weaken, thrumming beneath me, pulsating with memories of the lost and the determination for freedom, yet amidst this newfound hope grew a chilling whisper, winding its way into the corners of my consciousness. You think this will end anything? It mocked, echoing like the last breath of a dying lover. You make a grave mistake, for you have unleashed me in ways you cannot understand. There is more to the story. The darkness imploded around me, the very ground flecked with shards of light. But as the shadows roared, they shifted, contorting into new forms, figures molded from fury and feasting on despair, faces of those I'd thought lost now twisted into something monstrous. I stumbled back, the realization slashing through my mind, it didn't matter what I had done. The fight was never about the heart or the darkness. It was always about the stories that interwove like threads binding us into something eternal. Panic wrestled through me as I felt the heart begin to flicker, absorbing not just the cries but feeding them into a larger tapestry of horrors. You're trapped, the entity whispered coyly, hovering closer. You sought to save them, but you have bound yourself to my darkness. Now you are all of them, all of us. That I in that moment, the shadows erupted, flashes of my life, the laughter, the love, the familial bonds merged with the cries of those I had encountered, too tangled for discernment. Everything shattered in a cacophony of emotion, reshaping me into something neither light nor dark. The truth weighed heavily, suffocating, lowering me into the abyss of realization. The tales that swirl within us can only end in violence. We're not ready to relent. The feasting void of despair brightened once more, revealing nothing amid the growing emptiness. I understood that even if I had thrown the heart into the abyss, the shadows were not simply banished, they were adrift, scattered threads weaving back into a more expansive darkness. I had freed more than just a handful of souls, I had unleashed the very essence of the horror I had tried to escape. And then came the laughter, again layered, terrible, and awash in the knowledge that while I had redeemed some, I was forever bound to the dark underneath. Welcome to your tale, it sang, enveloping me as reality began to shift and coalesce into something entirely renewed. As the last vestiges of light faded, I was left suspended in trepidation, a vessel of intertwined destinies, trapped in an endless night of echoes, and I knew then that the true horror had always lingered just beneath the surface. Your story is not over, whispered the shadows, cradling me in their abominable warmth. It begins anew every time you dare to open a door.